From the outside, Jonathan Hayes had it all: unimaginable wealth, a palatial home in the hills, and a beautiful wife named Catherine, who stood by him through triumphs and failures. But behind closed doors, a single phone call shattered their picture-perfect life. It wasn't just any call. It was from the one woman Catherine never wanted to hear about. A mistress waiting in the wings, beckoning Jonathan to fulfill a promise he never should have made. He left in the dead of night without a word. Now days have turned into weeks. Catherine remains silent, and her silence is the loudest, most haunting sound Jonathan has ever heard. On a brisk autumn morning, sunlight spilled over the terraced gardens of the Hayes estate. Tall marble columns guarded the entrance to their mansion, a property so vast it even boasted a fountain specially designed by an award-winning Italian architect. Jonathan Hayes, a man in his mid-40s, had constructed his empire over 2 decades, starting with small-time real estate deals before scaling heights few believed were possible. His name frequently appeared in the society pages, but the public only saw the triumphant grin of a self-made millionaire. Behind that polished grin stood his wife of 15 years, Catherine. A gentle soul with an understated elegance, she was the glue that held the house together. At charity galas, Catherine rarely sought the spotlight. Instead, she often found small corners to talk to young, hopeful entrepreneurs or hold elderly patrons' hands. She was the definition of poise, but she was also a fortress keeping private pains hidden from all. That morning, Catherine was perched near the grand fireplace, stirring her tea in slow, pensive circles. Something about her quiet calm tugged at the air. Jonathan, fidgeting with a stack of documents before leaving for another high-stakes meeting, felt the tension thicken. She had not been herself for weeks: sleepless nights, forced smiles, absent-minded stares. Then came the phone call that changed everything. He answered in the hallway as Catherine watched. She recognized that look on his face in an instant: shame, guilt, and a rush of panic. Minutes later, Jonathan tucked the phone into his pocket and announced he had to go right now. He left behind the smell of aftershave and a single question hanging in the silence. Who had called, and why did it matter so much that Jonathan left without a proper goodbye? 3 hours before Jonathan's hurried departure, his phone had buzzed while he was still in bed. He'd woken with a start, verifying that Catherine was still asleep, and tiptoed into the hallway. On the other end of the line was Andrea Caldwell, a name he had tried to bury in his past. Andrea was not just any woman. She was the one who had once become his escape from the pressures of his marriage and the weight of his business. Her voice was smooth, tinged with desperation. "We need to talk, Jonathan. It's urgent." He felt his chest tighten. "Andrea, I told you this has to stop." "No, it doesn't. Not this time." He hung up, heart-pounding, sweaty palms still clutching the phone. Why now? Why, after so many months of silence, had she resurfaced with an urgent demand? Andrea's call was the thread that threatened to unravel Jonathan's perfectly woven life. The affair had been a closed chapter, sealed by mutual regret. He had sworn to himself and to Catherine, though she knew only fragments of the truth, that he would never see Andrea again. And yet, in that moment, he realized he couldn't pretend her hold on him was completely severed. During breakfast, Catherine's watchful eyes seemed to penetrate his every attempt at casual conversation. It was as though she could sense the ghost of Andrea lurking in the background. Then the call came again, mid-morning, and she overheard just enough to understand who was on the other end. Catherine's hand trembled slightly around her teacup, but she said nothing. Jonathan knew he should tell his wife. Instead, He slipped out of the house, following Andrea's pull, like a man stepping onto thin ice, hoping it wouldn't crack under the weight of his guilt. The day dragged on like a monotonous sequence of phone calls, boardroom agreements, and polite handshakes Jonathan barely remembered. His mind was adrift, anxiously awaiting the moment he would have to face Andrea. Several times he almost cancelled, but something about her voice felt like a loaded threat. Dusk arrived, and the cityscape turned amber. From his office window on the 38th floor, he could see the congested streets below each set of headlights merging into a glow that resembled a swarm of fireflies. He closed a deal with a smile that was all performance, then collected his briefcase and left before anyone could ask questions. His driver, Pierce, who'd been with the family for a decade, waited outside. Jonathan instructed Pierce to take him not to the estate, but to the Hotel Infinium, an upscale boutique renowned for its discreet clientele. The car ride passed in strained silence. Upon arrival, Andrea was already waiting in the lobby lounge, sipping a glass of Pinot Noir. Even in a fitted black dress, she stood out in the hushed elegance of the space. Her lips curled into a cryptic smile when Jonathan approached. He didn't return it. "Jonathan." She greeted him softly, her eyes flickering with a mix of longing and apprehension. "Andrea, this can't go on." "Catherine," he began. Andrea shook her head. "There's no Catherine right now. There's only me and you and a situation you can't run away from." He didn't realize the weight of that statement until much later. For now her words melted into the low hum of piano music in the background. By the time Jonathan made it home, it was near midnight. Catherine was awake but silent. She didn't ask where he had been, and he couldn't explain why he had left. It was easier to keep the truth buried. Days slipped into an uneasy routine. Catherine spoke to Jonathan only when necessary, polite exchanges about dinner times, the dog's vet appointment, or the weekend schedule. But there was no real conversation, no warmth, and certainly no genuine laughter. She didn't confront him, didn't demand an explanation. She simply observed from a distance. In the past, Jonathan would have greeted her silence with relief. He had always dreaded the possibility of an explosive argument, where Catherine's heartbreak might be laid bare in raw, punishing words. Now he realized that confrontation would have been preferable to the void that replaced any semblance of communication. He remembered the night he had proposed to her, years ago in front of the Trevi Fountain in Rome. She had beamed with such joy that strangers applauded and children clapped. He had promised to be her rock, to never let her face the harshness of the world alone. Yet here they were, living under the same roof, breathing the same air, but separated by an invisible wall of betrayal. Jonathan spent most nights in his home office, staring blankly at spreadsheets and investor reports. He had closed a major deal just last week, a property development partnership that earned him a personal meeting with Warren Buffett once. Normally, the triumph of such connections would energize him, but now each victory felt hollow. He considered pleading, apologizing, begging Catherine for any kind of reaction. But with each passing day, her silent treatment solidified into something unstoppable. A quiet storm that was unraveling Jonathan more effectively than any raised voice could. Flashbacks to the early days of his affair with Andrea haunted him during his long hours of restlessness. He had met Andrea at a corporate gala, not unlike the ones he and Catherine attended regularly for philanthropic purposes. Catherine was there that evening, but a migraine forced her to leave early. Jonathan stayed to maintain appearances and ended up sharing a glass of champagne with Andrea, a rising star in the luxury fashion industry. He was struck by Andrea's vivacious spirit. She was unapologetically ambitious, flirtatious, and her laughter filled every corner of the ballroom. At first, it was just a friendly conversation, but the second meeting, scheduled over coffee to discuss a potential collaboration, carried a spark neither could ignore. Jonathan told himself it was harmless. He was happily married. He had a son, Ethan, who was 13 at the time. In no way did he plan on risking his family. But Andrea's allure was magnetic. She challenged him, made him feel young, free. What started as a few stolen lunches evolved into clandestine weekend getaways. By the time he fully grasped the gravity of the betrayal, the damage was already done. Catherine confronted him with tears in her eyes, but also with a composed dignity that left him speechless. He promised it would end, and it did for a time. Yet the guilt never left him. It festered beneath every conversation, every affectionate gesture with Catherine, who had chosen to give him a second chance. Now, with Andrea's sudden reappearance, Jonathan feared the entire dark chapter was about to be ripped open again, and he had no idea how badly it would destroy the fragile peace he and Catherine had spent years building. Jonathan's world was not just golden chandeliers and gala dinners. Behind the lavish parties and magazine covers was a relentless, cutthroat environment. He managed multiple real estate ventures under the umbrella of Hayes and Morgan Holdings, co-founded with his college friend, David Morgan. Together they built an empire, flipping distressed properties into five-star hotels, investing in high-rise condos, even branching out into commercial malls across Europe. Money had never been a problem, but it brought other forms of stress: lawsuits from disgruntled tenants, battles with city councils, and sometimes shady demands from opportunistic partners. Jonathan prided himself on staying above board, ensuring that Hayes and Morgan remained a respected name. However, with each new deal, the stakes seemed to grow higher, and the margin for moral compromise often widened. Catherine was always there to ground him. She managed a charity foundation named after her late mother, Grace Anderson, dedicated to providing housing solutions for homeless families. Through this foundation, Catherine poured her heart into giving back, a stark contrast to the ruthless pace of Jonathan's corporate battlefield. She reminded him of their roots. Both had grown up in modest households. She insisted that success should never outshine empathy. But success had come so fast, so strong, that Jonathan felt like a passenger on a runaway train. He rarely found the brakes, nor did he always want to. The affair with Andrea, he often rationalized, was a twisted response to the suffocating demands on him. A poor excuse, but one he clung to for a time. Now, as his empire kept growing, so did the cracks in his once stable marriage, and the hush that fell over his home threatened to erode not just his family's unity, but also his carefully curated reputation. Andrea was not the type of woman to knock politely and wait for permission to enter someone's life. She burst in, set her own terms, and demanded compliance. That was how she had conquered the fashion world, and it was how she had managed to ensnare Jonathan in the first place. One afternoon, Jonathan found himself in the corner booth of an upscale sushi restaurant, facing her across a bamboo-laden table. Andrea had requested the meeting, no demanded it. He had hoped it would be their final conversation, but the tension in the air suggested otherwise. "I'm done making excuses," she began, her voice low. "I'm done waiting in the background while you decide what scraps of time and affection you can spare." Jonathan rubbed his temples. "Andrea, we agreed." It ended. "We can't keep—" "It might have ended for you." She cut him off, leaning forward, her eyes ablaze. "But what if I told you I'm not just here for closure, that I have, something that could destroy the empire you've built. He felt his heart skip a beat. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, email printouts, transaction details, and suspicious wire transfers. Jonathan's face went pale. Some of these transactions linked back to questionable deals he had made with a foreign construction firm years ago, deals that tiptoed the line of legality. Enough to spark a scandal at the very least. Andrea's smile was razor-sharp. Help me build my future, Jonathan, and maybe I'll forget to send these to the authorities, or worse yet, your precious Catherine. Jonathan realized this meeting was far from a mere emotional plea. Andrea had come armed with leverage blackmail, and he was staring at a ticking time bomb that threatened more than just his marriage. Back at the estate, Catherine carried on with her life in a methodical, almost mechanical way. She attended charity events, organized her foundation's latest housing initiative, and made sure Ethan was handling his university applications. At dinner, she'd inquire about Jonathan's day in the same polite tone she might use with a casual acquaintance. Yet she was no fool. Catherine sensed the dark cloud looming over her household. She knew something was brewing in Jonathan's life, something beyond just a case of midlife crisis. And if Andrea had indeed resurfaced, there was no telling what havoc she might wreak this time. Most telling of all was Jonathan's shift in demeanor. If the man was skilled at anything, it was compartmentalizing. But Catherine noticed subtle cracks, his restless pacing in the study, the way he stared at his phone, constantly expecting a call. And on the days Andrea must have summoned him, Catherine found the sheets on his side of the bed still cold by midnight. Yet she chose not to confront him. Not yet. She remembered her mother's words. Sometimes the loudest response is no response. She wanted to see how far Jonathan would go with his web of deceit. She wanted to see if he would muster the courage to tell her the truth unprompted. That night, she sat in front of their bedroom mirror, brushing her hair in long, slow strokes. Her reflection betrayed no anger, only a resigned determination. She was waiting, listening, a statue carved out of heartbreak and quiet strength. If Jonathan thought her silence was a mere act of submission, he had no idea what was coming next. Jonathan felt trapped in a labyrinth of his own making. The blackmail Andrea dangled over his head was potent enough to end not only his marriage, but also his professional empire. With the real estate market so tightly monitored and public trust crucial to investors, any hint of illegal dealings or off-the-record payouts would spark a media firestorm. He tried to stay ahead of the problem, calling in favors from old friends in legal circles. One of them, Robert Klein, had once worked as an advisor on Bill Gates's philanthropic initiatives. Robert was sharp, well-connected, and discreet. Over whiskey one evening in Jonathan's private lounge, he laid out the facts. If she goes public, you're in for a long, ugly battle. Even if you beat the charges, your name will be smeared in the headlines for years. Jonathan's gaze was distant, his knuckles white from gripping the armrest. I can't let that happen, Robert. I built this company from scratch. My family can't go through that kind of public scandal. And Catherine Robert asked gently. Jonathan took a slow breath. She's already suffering. I need to fix this before it destroys everything. But fix it how Andrea demanded significant financial backing for a venture she wanted to start, a high-end fashion line with an international footprint. She wanted seed money in the tens of millions, a ridiculous ask, even for Jonathan. Yet the alternative was far worse. In the quiet corners of his estate, he'd stare at family portraits. Catherine's beaming smile, Ethan's carefree grin, and his guilt would cut him to the core. The next morning, he made a decision that compromised what little remained of his integrity. He would pay Andrea buying time to figure out an escape route from the trap he had fallen into. The first inkling that something was amiss in the Hayes empire emerged during a routine board meeting at Hayes & Morgan Holdings. David Morgan, co-founder and Jonathan's oldest friend, had noticed unexplained large transfers in the corporate accounts. At first he assumed they were for some hush-hush property acquisition. Jonathan was known to keep certain deals close to the vest, but the amounts were staggering, and there was no accompanying paper trail. David confronted Jonathan in his office after everyone else had gone home for the day. "What's going on, John? We don't make moves like this without consulting each other. We've never kept secrets until now." Jonathan loosened his tie, feigning nonchalance. "Just a side project. I'm exploring a new opportunity." "Don't lie to me." David interrupted, his voice grim. "I've been your partner for 20 years. You think I can't see what's happening? You're diverting funds to something off the books. If someone audits us, we're both in serious trouble." Jonathan's shoulders sagged. The facade of confidence he'd maintained cracked under David's interrogation. But he couldn't tell David the whole truth. "Look, trust me, I'm handling it. It's personal. I'll pay the company back." David studied him for a moment. Frustration etched into his features. "I'm your friend, Jonathan, not just your business partner. Whatever trouble you're in, I can help. But I need to know what it is. Don't shut me out." Jonathan wanted to confess everything: the affair, Andrea's blackmail, his crumbling marriage. But the words stuck in his throat. David had met Catherine in college, introduced Jonathan to her, had stood as best man at their wedding. How could Jonathan admit he was on the brink of destroying everything David had helped him build? "I'll fix it," he said, simply, hoping his voice didn't betray the fear quivering inside. The tension at Hayes & Morgan mirrored the tension at the Hayes estate. Catherine continued to maintain her stoic silence, while Jonathan grew increasingly desperate to keep up appearances. Ethan, now 19. Home for a brief break from his college campus tours, sensed the undercurrents. He found it strange that neither of his parents was truly present, his mother quietly withdrawn, his father distracted and jumpy. One evening, Ethan asked Catherine if everything was okay. She mustered a small smile. "Don't worry, darling. Focus on your studies and your future." Her tone told him that further questions would lead nowhere. Later he approached Jonathan in the study. Jonathan was reviewing more documents related to Andrea's demands, the lines of worry clearly etched on his face. Seeing Ethan, he quickly closed the folder. "Hey, kiddo. You okay?" "That's what I came to ask you," Ethan replied, eyebrows furrowed. "Everything feels off." Jonathan swallowed hard, trying to placate his son. "Your mother and I are fine. Just a rough patch at work. You know how businesses can be." He patted Ethan's shoulder, forcing a grin he didn't feel. But the teenager wasn't convinced. He saw the darkness in his father's eyes. After Ethan went to bed, Jonathan sat alone in the living room. Light from the crystal chandelier cast shifting patterns on the marble floor. The house was too big, too quiet, the grandeur mocking him. It felt like a palace-turned-prison. He reached for the family album on the coffee table, pages of happier times. A smiling Catherine holding a toddler, Ethan at the beach, a younger Jonathan, celebrating their first $1 million deal, stared back at him. He realized that if he didn't find a way out soon, those memories would be all that remained of a once loving family. Unbeknownst to Jonathan, Catherine was far from idle during her weeks of silence. She had always been a patient observer, and she used her understated composure to her advantage. While Jonathan was preoccupied with Andrea's blackmail and covert transactions, Catherine quietly hired a private investigator named Simone Keyes, a trusted contact from her charity network, who specialized in discreet inquiries for battered women and their children. Catherine intended to gather facts before deciding her next step. She wanted to know if Andrea truly was involved again, and if so, how deep the betrayal ran this time. She suspected there was more than mere adultery in play. Jonathan's frantic behavior signaled a problem that extended beyond romance. Simone's reports came in bits and pieces. First sightings of Jonathan, meeting Andrea at various upscale locales, restaurants, lounges, and once at the Hotel Infinium. Next came financial data gleaned from leaked sources. Catherine felt her stomach twist when she saw the sums involved. Andrea's demands clearly weren't for hush money alone. They pointed to something bigger, more sinister. Catherine took the news with a heavy heart, but also a sense of resolve. She would not confront Jonathan with accusations until she had the full story. Instead, she began to make quiet preparations on visiting her personal assets, adjusting the foundation's board structure, and updating her legal documents. It wasn't about retaliation. It was about ensuring she wouldn't be left powerless if Jonathan's house of cards came tumbling down. She refused to be a victim. If the day came that she needed to leave, she would do so with her dignity and her charity's integrity intact. Her mother had always taught her, in times of crisis, plan carefully and act decisively. Catherine intended to do just that. Andrea, emboldened by the initial transfers she had extorted from Jonathan, escalated her demands. She wanted not only financial backing, but also public endorsement, an invitation to high-profile events where Jonathan could introduce her as a business associate. In her eyes, that would lend her fashion label the credibility she craved. Jonathan balked at the idea. Appearing in public with Andrea would be social suicide for him and an explicit admission of their connection. But Andrea's threats were growing bolder. She alluded to a stash of incriminating documents, including emails that indicated more than financial improprieties, perhaps evidence that Jonathan had used inside information to outmaneuver competitors. One evening in the penthouse suite of a 5-star hotel, Andrea laid out her ultimatum. "I want a partnership contract signed and a public announcement by next month. If you don't comply, I'll unleash every document I have." Her eyes burned with ambition. The lines of her designer dress and the glint in her jewelry spoke volumes about her hunger for luxury, power, and validation. Jonathan felt nauseous, pinned to the wall by the sheer weight of her demands. "I can't just wave a wand and make it happen," he protested. "I have shareholders. I have a family. You're asking me to destroy my reputation in the open." Andrea leaned closer. "Your reputation, Jonathan, it's already on the line. The question is whether you want to control the narrative or let it devour you." She placed a manicured hand gently on his lapel. "I have a vision for my brand. We both know you can make it happen. Let's stop pretending you're not going to cave." After she left, Jonathan slumped into a chair, sweat beading on his forehead. 1 month. He had 30 days before Andrea detonated the bomb that could ruin him. As pressure mounted, Jonathan found an unexpected ear in his longtime housekeeper, Rosa Martinez. Rosa had served the Hayes family for nearly a decade. She was a discreet figure in the household, managing staff schedules, organizing dinner parties, and ensuring the mansion ran like a well-oiled machine. One late night, Jonathan wandered into the kitchen in search of something to calm his nerves. He found Rosa cleaning up the scent of lavender and dish soap filling the air, usually reserved. Rosa caught the haunted look in Jonathan's eyes. "Senor Hayes," she said softly, "Are you all right?" He paused, not knowing why. He felt compelled to confide in her. Maybe because she was there, and he had no one else he could trust without risking exposure. "I've made a mess of things, Rosa," he admitted, voice quivering. "A terrible mess that I might not be able to fix." Rosa set aside her cloth and looked at him with gentle concern. She knew nothing of the details, but she had seen the tension between Jonathan and Catherine, felt the heavy atmosphere permeating the house. "Sometimes it helps to speak with the ones we love," she offered, carefully choosing her words. "Silence can become a burden no one can carry alone." Jonathan exhaled sharply, letting the weight of her words sink in. Rosa, with her unwavering loyalty to the family, had given him a glimpse of clarity. He felt a flicker of courage, the smallest ember of hope. If he was to save his marriage, if there was any redemption left for him, he would need to break his own silence, even if Catherine refused to break hers. But the question remained. Could he speak the truth before the lies suffocated them both? Just when Jonathan thought he had a handle on Andrea's ultimatum, another complication arose. A stranger claiming to be a private investigator working for Andrea contacted him via an untraceable number. The man's voice was electronically distorted, but the message was clear. "We have evidence you wouldn't want to see the light of day. Keep the payments flowing." Alarm bells went off in Jonathan's mind. Andrea had never mentioned a partner in her blackmail scheme. Could she be collaborating with another entity? Or had her stolen documents fallen into the wrong hands? Desperate for answers, Jonathan confronted Andrea the next day in a quiet corner of a public park, out of earshot of potential eavesdroppers. She seemed genuinely startled by the accusation. "I didn't hire anyone, Jonathan. If someone's blackmailing you, it's not me or anyone I know." Her indignant expression suggested she was either an excellent actress or truly in the dark. The call itself was vague, but threatening talk of hidden recordings, financial logs, and even personal videos that could tarnish Jonathan's image if released. Jonathan realized he might be dealing with opportunistic criminals who stumbled on Andrea's incriminating files or managed to intercept her communications. Now he found himself ensnared in a double web of blackmail Andrea on one side, these unknown figures on the other. Worst of all, each demanded something different. Andrea craved legitimacy and financial support, while the strangers wanted outright extortion. Jonathan had to figure out which threat posed the greatest immediate danger, or he risked losing everything he had worked for. Amid this turmoil, Catherine's unwavering silence felt even more ominous. He had lost control not just of his marriage, but of the entire narrative. It was as though his life was a stage, and everyone else was writing the script. The chandelier above Catherine's desk sparkled with midday light as she flipped through a thick stack of documents, Simone Key's latest report. Printed pages, receipts, timestamps, and surveillance photos were neatly tabbed and annotated. It was all there. Jonathan's late-night meetings with Andrea, the payments made from shell accounts, one particularly damning photo, the two of them exiting a hotel lobby just after midnight. Andrea's hand brushing his jacket lapel, Jonathan's eyes scanning nervously for bystanders. Catherine stared at the image without blinking. Her heart ached, but it didn't tremble. She had seen enough. This wasn't a detour. This was a pattern, a rot deep within the roots of her marriage. And yet she didn't rage. She didn't cry. Her response, as always, was measured, deliberate. For weeks, she had held her silence, not out of passivity, but precision. Now it was time to act. She placed the report in a drawer and unlocked a hidden cabinet built into the antique desk. Inside were legal files, her personal holdings, property, deeds, trust documents, and a copy of the Foundation's bylaws. She reviewed each one with meticulous care. Catherine had spent years nurturing Grace House Foundation, named after her mother. The charity had grown from a small neighborhood initiative into a national non-profit. She'd raised funds, cultivated partnerships, and personally mentored hundreds of women escaping domestic instability. That foundation, her life's work, had to remain untouched by Jonathan's scandal. Step 1. Protect the foundation. She scheduled an emergency board vote to restructure its leadership. Though she would remain president, she distributed legal authority across 3 trustees. Should anything happen to her financially, the foundation would remain intact, autonomous, untouchable. Step 2. Protect herself. She gathered documentation, proving her independent ownership of key assets. 2 properties in her maiden name, separate bank accounts established before marriage, and an untouched inheritance from her grandmother. She quietly contacted a financial advisor and set up a trust. It wasn't about divorce. Not yet. It was about survival. Catherine refused to become collateral damage in Jonathan's spiral. Step 3. Prepare for confrontation. She still didn't know the full extent of Andrea's grip on Jonathan, but Simone's last update mentioned a troubling pattern: encrypted emails being forwarded to unknown parties. Catherine's instincts told her more players were involved now, possibly criminal ones. She sipped her tea, letting its warmth steady her thoughts. Her fingers moved over the desk's surface, pausing at an old framed photo of her and Jonathan, taken on their 10th anniversary in Venice. They were laughing, young, radiant, unaware of the cracks forming just beneath the surface. She didn't hate him, not completely, but she didn't trust him either, and trust was the currency she could no longer afford to spend. The door creaked slightly behind her, but she didn't turn. It was Rosa, the housekeeper, quietly setting down a tray. "Thank you," Catherine said softly. Rosa hesitated. "Everything okay, Signora?" Catherine looked up, her expression unreadable. "Not yet," she replied. "But it will be." She watched Rosa retreat, then turned back to her files. There was still more to do, still more to secure. She wasn't preparing for war, not quite. But she was preparing for impact. And when the moment came, Catherine Harrington Hayes would not be the one left broken. Ethan Hayes wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon, and the mansion had taken on the hollow stillness of a home trying to hold itself together. With both parents distant and preoccupied, Ethan had retreated to his room to finish a university application essay, but his laptop charger had vanished. After turning his room upside down, he remembered seeing a spare one in his father's study weeks ago. The study was usually off-limits, unless Jonathan was present, but the door stood ajar now, and the house was silent. With a quick glance down the hallway to make sure no one was around, Ethan stepped inside. The room was as pristine as always. Books-aligned desk, polished, everything in its place. He scanned the side drawers for the charger, but found only a mess of old business cards, staplers, and pens. Then beneath a legal pad, he spotted something strange. A small flash drive tucked into a slim envelope marked only with the initials AC. Curiosity flickered. Ethan hesitated. He knew he shouldn't, but something about the initials triggered a memory. A woman's name spoken in anger years ago, in a muffled argument he wasn't meant to overhear. Andrea Caldwell. He took the flash drive and slipped it into his pocket. Back in his room with his door locked and headphones plugged in to mask any noise, Ethan opened the drive on his laptop. What he found made his stomach twist into knots. hundreds of files. There were emails between his father and Andrea, wire transfers labeled under vague project names, hotel receipts, travel logs, cryptic notes referring to settlements and media mitigation. Ethan didn't fully understand the legal language or the financial maneuvering, but he understood one thing clearly. His father had been hiding something massive. More than an affair. More than a lie. There were documents hinting at blackmail, legal threats, strategic payments made through offshore accounts, and all of it traced back to Andrea. Ethan leaned back in his chair, heart pounding, his childhood idol. The man who taught him about responsibility, ambition, and integrity was now someone he barely recognized. It was like finding a crack in a marble statue and realizing it had been hollow all along. He stared at the drive. What do I do with this? Telling his father was out of the question. Jonathan had grown cold and defensive. Approaching his mother was even harder. Catherine floated through the house like a phantom. Her silences weighted with meaning Ethan couldn't quite decipher, and yet something in him knew she already suspected. Maybe not the full extent, but something. The way she looked at Jonathan during dinner. The quiet, clipped responses, the way she never asked where he went late at night. Ethan carefully removed the drive and slid it into a book on his shelf, tucking it between pages of a forgotten thriller novel. He knew this wasn't just a secret, it was a bomb. One that had already begun to tick. For now he would wait. Observe. But one thing was certain, the myth of his father had shattered. And Ethan wasn't sure yet if he wanted to expose what he'd found or protect the only version of his family he still believed in. The sky outside the Hayes estate was velvet black by the time Jonathan stumbled through the front doors. The storm inside him matched the weather, restless, chaotic, loud. He had stopped at a bar after another heated meeting with Andrea, nursing one too many bourbons in a desperate attempt to muffle the ticking time bomb of guilt that had followed him for weeks. He hadn't expected Catherine to be awake. Yet there she was, seated in the sitting room, with a book open in her lap, the fire casting a warm flicker against her high cheekbones. She looked ethereal, untouchable, as if she had transcended the drama he had brought into their lives. Jonathan froze, still gripping the front door handle like he was debating escape. But there was no turning back. Not anymore. "I need to talk to you," he said, softly, voice frayed by alcohol and dread. Catherine didn't answer. She slowly closed the book and set it aside. Her fingers delicate, precise. Her eyes met his, calm and unblinking. She didn't beckon. She didn't bristle. She simply waited. Jonathan walked in unsteadily, collapsing onto the opposite armchair. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his face like he could somehow erase everything that had happened. "I messed up." He began the words, tasting like acid. Still, she said nothing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't plan for any of this. Andrea, she came back into my life, and I tried to shut it down. I did. But then she started threatening me. She has documents, things from my past, emails, wire transfers. She's blackmailing me." A long silence stretched between them. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire. "She's not the only one," he added, voice cracking. "Someone else got hold of her files. They're demanding money too. I'm trapped, Catherine." She tilted her head slightly, studying him, like a surgeon about to make an incision. "I've spent weeks trying to fix it, trying to keep it from exploding," he continued. "And all this time, you've been here, silent, watching me fall apart. Why didn't you ask, Why didn't you confront me? She finally spoke, her voice quiet, but razor sharp. Because I wanted to see if you would choose the truth on your own. Jonathan's chest tightened. And you didn't, she added, eyes glinting with disappointment. You waited until the walls were caving in, and the headlines were coming for you. That's not a confession, Jonathan. That's survival. He felt the sting of her words more deeply than any slap. He reached out, but she didn't move. I didn't want to lose you, he whispered. You already did, she replied. He sank back, defeated. Is there anything left for us? She rose from her seat with regal grace. That depends on whether you start telling the whole truth, not because you're cornered, but because you finally respect me enough to stop lying. She walked toward the hallway, stopping briefly beside him. You should sleep. Tomorrow's storm is coming, and you'll need clarity. Then she left him in the dim room, the firelight dancing over the ruins of his pride. For the first time, in a long time, Jonathan wasn't sure if his next move would save anything or only confirm that he'd already lost it all. It was a grey, overcast afternoon when Catherine decided it was time to meet Andrea face to face. No more guessing, no more filtered truths from Jonathan. She needed to look the woman who had threatened her marriage, her family, and her name in the eye, and she wanted to do it on her own terms. I want to meet her, Catherine had told Jonathan that morning, in a tone so calm it frightened him more than any outburst could have. Jonathan's reaction was immediate. Catherine, that's not necessary. She raised a single brow. It's necessary to me. He nodded slowly, realizing resistance would only make things worse. Catherine was no longer in waiting mode. She was in control. Later that day, they arranged a private lunch at a quiet French bistro on the outskirts of the city, one Catherine had often used for discreet charity donor meetings, neutral ground, elegant but secluded. Andrea arrived first. She wore a tailored black blazer over a silk blouse, every detail of her outfit curated to radiate power. But even her high heels couldn't disguise the slight stiffness in her stride as she spotted Catherine waiting at a corner table by the window. Catherine greeted her with a composed nod. Andrea. Mrs. Hayes. Andrea returned, sitting down slowly. Catherine, she corrected. No need for pretense today. Andrea's lips twitched into a smirk. Fair enough. A tense silence settled over the table as the waiter brought water and menus neither of them touched. Finally, Catherine leaned forward. I didn't come here to fight, she began. I came here to ask why. Why take this path? Blackmail, manipulation, financial extortion. You had other options. Andrea's gaze didn't waver. Did I? She said coolly. Because from where I sat, I was discarded. Tossed aside so Jonathan could go back to his picture-perfect life. He got to start over. I didn't. You made your choices, Catherine replied, her tone sharp but not cruel. You knew he was married. You knew there was a family involved. Andrea scoffed. I also knew he was miserable. And when he told me it was over, I accepted it. For a while. But then I saw him again on TV, at events smiling like nothing ever happened, and I realized men like Jonathan never pay the price unless someone makes them. Catherine's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped a register. So that's what this is about. Vengeance. Andrea leaned back in her chair. No, it's about leverage. It's about ensuring I get something out of the years I wasted on him. You got time. You got memories. And now you want a legacy funded by blackmail." Andrea's smile faltered for the first time. "Call it whatever you want. I'm getting what I deserve." "No," Catherine said, evenly standing. "You're not. What you deserve is a life free of bitterness. What you deserve is to move on. Build something real, not something stitched together from someone else's ruin." Andrea rose too. "You sound noble, Catherine, but you're still the wife who got everything. And you're still the woman who settled for scraps and called it empowerment," Catherine said, her voice cutting with elegance. "This conversation is over." With that, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Andrea standing alone, staring at the water glasses at the untouched menus, and the reflection of a woman who had tried to win with sabotage. It was not a victory for Catherine, but it was a reclaiming of power. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She didn't need to. Her presence had said enough, and as she stepped into the waiting car, Jonathan looked at her with something close to reverence and a fear that she might be preparing to leave him behind entirely. The reckoning came not with a bang, but with a whisper, an anonymous email quietly forwarded to a prominent investigative journalist at the Business Ledger. Attached were scanned documents, financial records, and threads of correspondence, so damning they needed no dramatic flourish. Within hours, the story hit the wire. Illegal dealings uncovered at Hayes & Morgan Holdings emails. Suggest. Years of secret payouts. Backdoor transfers. Jonathan Hayes stared blankly at the headline glowing on his phone screen. He was in the middle of a conference call when it broke, and the moment he read the alert, his voice caught. Panic rose like boss in his throat. The fallout was immediate. Phone calls from alarmed board members harangued non-stop. Investors demanded answers. A red banner flashed across financial news networks, showing Hayes & Morgan's stock plummeting by the hour. Within a single afternoon, over $180 million in market value evaporated. David Morgan, his business partner and once trusted friend, stormed into Jonathan's office. "What the hell is this?" he thundered, slamming a printed copy of the article onto the desk. "You said it was personal, something you'd fix. You didn't say it was criminal." Jonathan, pale and shaken, tried to form words. "I didn't know it would come to this. The emails, they weren't supposed to surface. But they did." David snapped. "And now our entire company is bleeding out because you couldn't keep your secrets buried." Across town, Catherine watched the news coverage unfold from the sitting room of the mansion's East Wing. The estate had become a battlefield of silence and shattered trust. She hadn't spoken to Jonathan in days, and now, as she listened to financial analysts dissect her husband's downfall, she felt both heartbreak and vindication rise inside her. She didn't gloat. She didn't cry. She simply stood and gathered her things. That evening, when Jonathan returned home, he found her in the living room. The lights low, the air heavy with finality. Catherine sat with her legs crossed, a single suitcase by her side. "I've spoken with my attorneys," she said calmly, not bothering to look up as he entered. "The foundation is secure. Ethan is staying with me. We'll be moving into the townhouse temporarily. You'll remain here until further notice." Jonathan swallowed hard. "Catherine, please. Don't go. We can—" She looked up at him, then eyes shimmering but dry. "You broke us, Jonathan. You took everything we built. Trust, family, even dignity, and gambled it for someone who blackmailed you into submission." His voice cracked. "I never meant to." "You did it anyway," she interrupted softly. "Intent doesn't undo betrayal." He dropped to his knees in front of her, the weight of the day finally crashing down. "Tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this. I'll do anything." Catherine looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then, with steady grace, she rose from her seat and picked up her suitcase. "That's up to you," she said. "But I won't be your audience while you figure it out." She walked past him, leaving only the scent of her perfume and the sound of her heels against the marble. The door clicked shut behind her. Jonathan remained kneeling in the center of the room, surrounded by grandeur that now felt like a mausoleum. Outside, reporters swarmed the front gates. His empire, his marriage, and his carefully crafted identity were all unraveling. And through it all, Catherine's silence echoed louder than any condemnation ever could. In the following months, Jonathan faced a barrage of legal scrutiny. High-profile attorneys were hired, settlements were negotiated, and hush money was offered to keep the more damning pieces of evidence out of public view. The company's board forced him to step down temporarily as CEO while an internal investigation was launched. David Morgan, furious and hurt nonetheless, stepped in to stabilize the ship, hoping to salvage the name they had built from scratch. The scandal rippled through the real estate world, making Jonathan a cautionary tale about mixing personal failings with business dealings. Catherine, meanwhile, focused on expanding her foundation, leveraging the media attention to highlight her charitable work. She refused to capitalize on Jonathan's downfall, but nor did she shield him from it. She maintained her dignity, continuing to operate as the poised, compassionate woman the public had always known. Andrea tried to salvage her own ambitions in the chaos, but her demands became moot once the blackmailers released the documents. She quietly disappeared from the social scene. Rumors suggesting she had retreated to Europe to escape the legal labyrinth she had helped create. Ethan, bruised by the ordeal, returned to his studies, deciding to major in business ethics, a choice that stirred a mix of guilt and pride in Jonathan. Slowly, father and son began to repair their bond, finding common ground in the lessons learned from Jonathan's errors. As for Jonathan and Catherine, their relationship hovered in a state of limbo. Divorce papers remained unsigned, but they lived separate lives within the same estate. On rare evenings, they'd share a quiet dinner, exchanging polite, almost friendly words. It wasn't forgiveness, at least not yet. But perhaps it was the seed of something that might bloom again one day under the right conditions. Thank you for journeying through this whirlwind of ambition, betrayal, and a silence that echoed louder than any confrontation could. If this story gripped you from start to finish, imagine the chapters yet unwritten. Could Jonathan and Catherine mend their fractured trust, or is all lost beneath the weight of broken vows and corporate scandal? Only time will tell if regret can blossom into redemption. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale, please give this video a like, share it with fellow story lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that dive into the human heart with all its flaws and hopes. By engaging with our content, you help us continue spinning tales that challenge, entertain, and inspire. Stay tuned for the next gripping journey, because every secret, every silence, and every confession has a story worth telling. They say every marriage has its secrets, some small enough to slip under the radar, others large enough to crack the very foundations of trust. But what if the secret is discovered in the most unforgiving spotlight of all, a crowded upscale restaurant? And what if, at the exact moment, a wife learns about her husband's betrayal? She's carrying his child, unsure whether to expose him, protect him, or destroy everything in one impulsive move. This story follows the meteoric rise and catastrophic fall of Derek Harrington. A man who had it all until one dinner turned his world into a firestorm of scandal and investigation. Derek Harrington had always exuded a confidence that verged on arrogance. He was the type of man people noticed in a room, tall, well-groomed, with an intense gaze that made you think he saw your secrets before you even decided to trust him. At 37, he was already heading one of the fastest-growing private tech investment firms in the country. Harrington Ventures nestled in the heart of New York City. Many had whispered comparisons. He could be the next Elon Musk, or he's aiming to dethrone Bill Gates in philanthropic efforts. Of course, those comparisons were mostly hot air in the media, but Derek ate them up like candy and fueled his ambition further. He had grown up in a modest home in Syracuse, New York, the son of a middle school teacher and an unemployed mechanic. Derek swore to himself at a young age that he would never again know the taste of poverty and uncertainty. If there was a mountain, he would climb it. If there was a competitor, he would annihilate them, or better yet, buy them out. Ever since his first big deal, a startup buyout that netted him a cool $20 million by the age of 26, Derek became addicted to the thrill of high-stakes ventures. His wife, Catherine Harrington, was the silent strength behind him. Once Catherine Barnes, she had come from an entirely different world, an only child raised in Connecticut by a wealthy yet tight-knit family who adored her. Catherine's father, Alexander Barnes, had a small but respectable real estate firm that catered to elite clients. Catherine had an aura of class that Derek desperately needed. Although he was confident in boardrooms and pitch meetings, he often floundered in high society's intricacies. Catherine taught him how to navigate those elite circles with charm and grace. For the past 6 years, their marriage had been a blend of love, shared ambition, and occasional tension, particularly since Derek began pouring all his time into Harrington Ventures. Catherine had repeatedly asked for a child, a family. Derek always said, soon pushing it down his list of priorities. But finally, to Catherine's breathless joy, she became pregnant. Derek, for his part, seemed excited, though many nights he would return home after midnight, exhausted, complaining about client dinners or late-night strategy sessions. Still, Catherine believed in him. She believed in his vision, in his ability to provide not just for her, but for their soon-to-arrive child. Even if love had cooled into routine, she trusted Derek would protect their family. She had no idea her entire life would be thrown upside down by one small choice, deciding to meet an old friend for dinner in the heart of Manhattan. Catherine had not planned to be at the upscale restaurant Aux Merveilles that particular night. She was 8 months pregnant and feeling more fatigued than usual. But her college friend, Melanie Carter, was passing through New York for the first time in years and insisted on seeing her. To Catherine, it felt like an unexpected gift, an escape from waiting at home alone for Derek to walk through the door at some unknown hour. Melanie had chosen Aux Merveilles because she'd read about it in a luxury travel magazine. The interior glimmered with crystal chandeliers, and each table was separated by translucent screens that glowed with soft amber light. The gentle hum of hushed conversations filled the air, occasionally interrupted by the clink of expensive dinnerware. Catherine arrived early, leaning on the hostess stand for a moment to steady herself. A sympathetic staff member immediately guided her to a plush velvet seat and offered a glass of water. She felt a bit out of place in her maternity dress, noting the swirl of elegant women in cocktail dresses and men in tailored suits. But she brushed off the discomfort. She was here to see her friend, not to impress the Manhattan elite. While waiting for Melanie, Catherine decided to freshen up in the restroom. On her way back, something caught her attention through the filmy screen of a private dining area. At first, she had no idea why her gaze lingered there. She could see a man's silhouette, tall and commanding, and across from him sat a slim figure with flowing dark hair. Catherine's heart twitched. The tilt of the man's head, the way he gestured with his hand, that was Derek's mannerism. But it couldn't be. Derek had told her he was in an urgent meeting on the other side of town. Her heart pounding. Catherine took careful steps toward the screen, making sure to stay hidden behind the plush drapery that separated the main dining area from the private alcoves. A waiter passed by, but she quickly turned away, pretending to examine a painting on the wall until he was gone. Then she returned her gaze to the table. Yes. It was Derek. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, the kind he wore for special private events. And he wasn't dining with a business associate. His companion was a woman with an air of cold, dazzling beauty. Catherine didn't recognize her immediately. Maybe she was a client. But then she noticed the way the woman's hand stretched across the table to rest on Derek's fingers, a gesture far too intimate for a business meeting. Catherine's stomach churned. She felt dizzy. She almost rushed forward to confront him, but some primal sense of caution rooted her to the spot. She wasn't prepared for a scene. She didn't know if she was strong enough to face the answers to the burning questions swirling in her mind. So she watched. Derek leaned in, and the woman did the same, her glossy black hair falling forward to frame her face. Catherine could make out the name Sabrina Chen from the conversation. They chuckled softly, and Derek brushed a strand of the woman's hair back behind her ear. Catherine's hands shook tears threatening to flood her eyes. She pressed herself against the wall. She needed to get out of there, needed to breathe. She turned and hurried away, nearly running into a startled Melanie who was just arriving. Melanie took one look at Catherine's pale face, then glanced curiously at the private alcove. "Are you okay?" she asked, hands gripping Catherine's arms gently. "My goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost." In a strangled voice, Catherine replied, "I'm not feeling well, Mel. Can we go somewhere else?" Melanie, always sensitive, nodded without question. She guided Catherine outside, hailed a taxi, and insisted they go back to Catherine's penthouse so she could rest. Catherine murmured something about not wanting to be alone, about needing to talk. Once in the taxi, she told Melanie everything that Derek was there with another woman, clearly more than a business associate. Her friend listened, anger flaming in her eyes. "You need to confront him," Melanie said. "He can't get away with this, especially now when you're about to have his child." But Catherine felt paralyzed. Her mind spun with a million scenarios, none of them good. She wanted the safety of denial, to pretend she didn't witness the betrayal. But she also wanted the raw truth. By the time they reached her penthouse, she had made a decision she would wait for Derek to come home. He would have to look her in the eye and explain. Night stretched on with excruciating slowness. Melanie offered to stay, but Catherine insisted she'd manage. She needed to confront her husband alone. So Melanie left with repeated promises that Catherine call her for any reason, day or night. The apartment felt cavernous once Catherine was alone. Her baby kicked inside her as if sensing her mother's distress. Sometime near midnight, Catherine dozed off on the living room couch, still in her maternity dress and heels, phone clutched in her trembling hand. She awoke to the click of the front door. Derek stepped in laptop bag over his shoulder tie, slightly loosened. He paused when he saw her lying on the couch in the dim light. "You're still awake?" he asked, crossing the room to place a kiss on her forehead. His breath smelled faintly of wine. Catherine recoiled, the sting of his betrayal fresh in her mind. She struggled to compose herself, but emotion burst forth. "Where were you?" Derek froze, obviously caught off guard by her accusatory tone. "I told you I had a meeting." "Don't lie," Catherine shouted. "I saw you, Derek. I saw you at Aux Merveilles with some woman named Sabrina Chen. You were touching her hair." She choked on the words, tears forming again. Derek's face went pale, then hardened with defiance. "You were spying on me." "Catherine, what were you doing there? Having dinner with a friend," she shot back. "But that's not the point. Don't try to twist this around. Just tell me the truth." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "She's just a client. Nothing more. The hair thing, it was just a friendly gesture. You know how these international investors can be. They appreciate closeness, personal connections. She's considering a large investment in Harrington Ventures." Catherine stared at him, heart twisting with disbelief. "I'm not a child, Derek. I know what I saw. That was no casual client dinner." He let out a breath, lips pressed together. "Okay. We're close. But it's complicated. Sabrina has connections with major stakeholders in Asia. She expects a certain rapport. If I don't keep her happy, we could lose a multi-million-dollar deal. So you're sleeping with her to make her invest." Catherine's voice trembled with fury and despair. "It's not that simple," Derek said, but he didn't deny it. "This is business, Catherine. And it's not... it's not what you think. Yes, she's flirtatious. Maybe I crossed a line, but it's for the company, for our future." Catherine stood, a surge of anger giving her strength, even in her pregnant state. "Our future, our child's future. This is how you plan to secure it, by betraying me." Derek's eyes flickered with guilt. But then he hardened again. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Harrington Ventures is on the verge of a major breakthrough. A single large investment could catapult us into the realm of industry giants. I can't afford to let moral qualms hold me back." Catherine felt as if the floor were dropping out from beneath her. She recognized Derek's ambition had always been borderline obsessive. But hearing him admit he'd compromised their marriage, the very sanctity of their relationship just for a deal, she had no words. A wave of exhaustion crashed over her, mingled with heartbreak. "Get out," she finally managed, voice weak yet resolute. "Catherine," he started. She turned away. "Sleep in the guest room. I can't even look at you right now." He opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Silent, he retreated to the guest bedroom, leaving Catherine to collapse onto the couch in tears. As she drifted in a half-conscious state of heartbreak, a single question throbbed in her mind. How could he do this to us? Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, stirring Catherine from a fitful sleep. She sat up, her body aching from the night spent on the couch. She half expected Derek to appear with an apology or at least an explanation better than it's for the deal. But the apartment was silent. A check of the guest room revealed he was gone. No note, no text. Only the faint smell of his cologne in the hallway. Catherine felt bitterness coil inside her like a snake. Had he left for work as though nothing had happened? Trying to compose herself, she went about her morning routine, feeding their fluffy grey cat Winston, who circled her legs anxiously, making a cup of tea, gazing out at the city skyline. But none of it soothed her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Melanie. She simply texted, "I'm here for you," followed by a heart emoji. Catherine typed a quick thanks and debated what to do next. Should she confront Derek at his office? Should she call her father? Confide in him? Then as she paced through the living room, the TV caught her attention. A news ticker scrolled across the bottom, and the anchor's solemn voice filled the silence. Ongoing investigation into potential insider trading and financial misconduct at Harrington Ventures. Derek Harrington's office has not yet released a statement, but sources say officials from the SEC are looking into suspicious activity. Catherine fumbled for the remote and turned up the volume. Her heart pounded with alarm. Investigation insider trading. This was the first she'd heard of anything official. The anchor went on. Harrington Ventures soared to prominence in the last few years, drawing comparisons to major tech moguls like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. But now regulators question whether certain investment gains came from illicitly obtained information. Derek Harrington was spotted at a private dinner last night with an unidentified associate, leading to speculation on whether this meeting is connected to the alleged misconduct. In that moment, Catherine felt a strange mixture of shock and vindication. She remembered the hush of Oxmervale, the private table Derek's murmured conversation with Sabrina Chen. Was this the reason for that meeting? She grabbed her phone and scrolled through financial news sites. All of them were erupting with the story. Harrington Ventures under siege. One headline read, "Inside the SEC probe teased another." She found nothing that concretely linked Sabrina Chen to the scandal, only rumors that Derek was meeting with someone who might hold the key to hush money or secret deals. Anxiety clawed at Catherine's stomach. This was beyond a marital betrayal. It might be a legal catastrophe. She needed answers. She dialed Derek's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Her next thought was to contact his assistant, the ever-efficient Amanda Wu, who always picked up or responded promptly. But even Amanda's phone rang until voicemail kicked in. Fearing the worst, Catherine decided to put aside her heartbreak for a moment and do what she could to protect her family. She reached for her coat and bag, then headed out the door, determined to confront Derek at his office if necessary. The offices of Harrington Ventures occupied the 20th through 22nd floors of a gleaming steel and glass tower in Midtown. When Catherine arrived, the usual bustle in the lobby was replaced by a tense hush. Small clusters of employees whispered, casting anxious glances toward a row of men in dark suits who were busy rifling through documents and laptops. It was clear the investigation was well underway. Catherine stepped off the elevator on the 22nd floor, where Derek's corner office overlooked the city. She braced herself for the sight of more investigators. Instead, she found the reception area swarming with them. She approached a stern-faced man, flipping through files. "Excuse me, I'm Catherine Harrington. I need to see my husband." He regarded her warily. "Do you have an appointment?" She almost laughed at the absurdity. "Appointment, I'm his wife. Is Derek in his office?" The man jerked his head toward a closed door. "He's in a meeting with the SEC officials and his legal team." "Best if you wait." Catherine felt her patience slip. "I'm not waiting," she said firmly. Without another glance, she marched to Derek's office door and turned the handle. Locked. She knocked, ignoring the mutterings of the investigators behind her. After an agonizing minute, the door swung open, revealing Derek's lawyer. A slim woman in a sharp navy suit, a phone pressed to her ear. She looked Catherine up and down. "Mrs. Harrington." "We're in the middle of something." Derek's voice cut through. "Let her in." The lawyer stepped aside, and Catherine entered the office. Derek stood at his desk, arms folded, face drawn and tired. Two men in dark suits sat in chairs across from him, notes scattered on the table. They regarded Catherine neutrally before turning back to Derek. "We'll give you a moment," one of the men said, as they gathered up their documents and stepped out. An awkward hush fell. Catherine closed the door behind them. For a heartbeat, she and Derek just stared at each other, the memory of last night's argument hanging between them. His eyes flickered with guilt concern, and something else, maybe relief. Catherine. He began running a hand over his face. I was going to call you once this settled. Her anger reignited at his dismissive tone. Settled, Derek. You're under investigation by the SEC. This isn't a small pothole in the road. The news is everywhere. He sighed. Look, I can't say much right now. It's an internal matter, and our lawyers say we should cooperate, but keep quiet publicly. There have been rumors of insider trading, but it's a misunderstanding. We're sorting it out. A misunderstanding, Catherine repeated. Does this have anything to do with Sabrina Chen and last night's dinner? Derek flinched at the name. Why would you think? Because the news outlets are already speculating about it. Derek, she hissed. If you were with her to discuss some insider deal. Stop, he cut in, raising a hand. I can't talk about her. Not here, not now. Let's just say I have things under control. Catherine couldn't believe what she was hearing. Under control? Derek, the entire office is crawling with investigators. I can't even reach your assistant. Amanda was told not to talk to anyone without the lawyers present, Derek said tightly. She's in a conference room with them now. This is standard procedure. Standard procedure, Catherine echoed, her voice faint with incredulity. How far does this go, Derek? Because if you think I'm going to sit at home pregnant while you're possibly facing criminal charges, I didn't do anything illegal, he snapped, though sweat beaded at his temple. Sabrina, it's complicated. She brought me some stock tips about a company we were considering investing in. She claimed she had reliable leads. You used them. Catherine pressed her heart, pounding. He swallowed. Not exactly. I just moved some assets around. I didn't know it would be considered insider information. She told me it was her own research, that it was legit. I never expected the SEC to come knocking. Catherine's mind reeled. So he had used Sabrina's tips, likely crossing a line into illegal territory. She stared at him, struggling to reconcile the charismatic man she fell in love with, the father of her unborn child, with this desperate figure in front of her. Finally, she said, "What do you want from me?" Derek. He looked pained. I need you to trust me. I'm meeting with Sabrina this afternoon to clarify things. She owes me an explanation. If she fed me illegal tips, it's on her. My lawyers can argue that I was deceived. Catherine's breath caught. You're meeting her again. After last night. It's business, he insisted. Look, I get how bad this looks. But if you want to protect our family, you'll let me handle this. I promise I'll fix it. Part of Catherine wanted to cling to the hope that he could, but she saw the desperation in his eyes, the guilt and confusion swirling there. His ambition, once so inspiring, had turned into a reckless obsession that might cost him everything. Maybe she should walk away, call her father, pack a bag and leave. But she couldn't, at least not yet. She carried his child, and some piece of her still loved him. She nodded once. Fine. But I'm not leaving you alone in this. I'm staying in the city. I'll do what I can to help. Derek exhaled relief passing over his face. He reached for her hands, but she stepped back. I'll trust you for now, she said, voice trembling. But remember, Derek, trust isn't infinite. You've already broken it once. That afternoon, Catherine found herself restless, pacing the penthouse. The SEC had allowed Derek to remain at the office, but insisted he provide any requested documents on demand. His phone was undoubtedly monitored, and Sabrina Chen was labeled a person of interest. Catherine tried to focus on calm. She set up a quiet corner to rest, turned on soft classical music, and attempted to soothe the baby within her. Yet every time she shut her eyes, she saw Derek leaning across that table. Saw him gently touching Sabrina's hair. How did we get here? She wondered. Have I been so naive? A phone call from an unfamiliar number broke her reverie. She picked up, heart hammering. A woman's voice spoke clipped and professional. Hello, Mrs. Harrington. My name is Caroline Patterson. I'm a journalist at the New York Daily Mirror. We're working on a story about your husband's company. Would you be willing to provide a statement? Catherine's mouth went dry. No comment, she said hastily, ending the call. But within minutes, another call came from yet another journalist. And then another. It seemed the entire press corps had decided to ring her up in search of a sensational quote. She turned off her phone, trembling with anxiety. The day crawled by. When Derek finally returned home, it was well past 8. Catherine opened the door to find him grim-faced, tie, undone hair disheveled. He looked like a man fighting a war on multiple fronts. Any progress? Catherine asked quietly. He nodded. Lawyers say there's no direct evidence yet. Just allegations that we traded on insider info for a few deals. But they'll keep digging. As for Sabrina... He paused, looking away. We spoke. She claims she's just a scapegoat. She said she's taking a flight back to Hong Kong tomorrow, and that the SEC can't touch her there. Catherine's stomach twisted. So she's running. He shrugged. Or, so she says. I tried to get her to talk to my lawyers, but she refused. She's not answering calls anymore. My attorneys are furious. They say if she disappears, it'll make me look even worse, like we're trying to hide something. Catherine eyed him. Are you still sleeping with her? Derek's cheeks burned red. No. Catherine, I messed up. Okay. I let things get too close, but it was never serious. Not on my end. She wanted to believe him, but suspicion dug its claws into her mind. Is that the truth, or just what you need me to believe? He hesitated. I'm not lying to you. Look, I promise you my relationship with Sabrina was purely for business connections. Maybe it crossed lines, but I never intended to leave you. Or... She shook her head, tears threatening again. How noble, she whispered sarcastically. Derek, I can't keep doing this. I can't watch you destroy yourself and our marriage in this pursuit of power. He reached for her, his hand trembling. For the first time she sensed he was truly afraid. Catherine, if we can get past this, I'll change. I'll make it right. Just stand by me, please. Looking into his eyes, she saw remnants of the man she'd married, the one who had once had dreams of giving them a beautiful life. Hesitantly, she placed her hand on his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. They stayed like that for a moment, broken but together. By the next morning, Catherine felt an urgent need for counsel. She made a phone call to someone she knew and trusted her father, Alexander Barnes. Despite their somewhat strained relationship, he had never fully approved of Derek's rags to riches aggression. Her father was a steady presence in her life. Dad, she said quietly when he picked up. Things are bad. Derek's company is under investigation. There's rumors of insider trading. She heard him exhale. I saw the news. Are you all right? I don't know. she confessed. He might have been unfaithful too. I feel like everything is spiraling. Her father's voice softened. Sweetheart, you need to take care of yourself. Think about my grandchild. Stress can't be good for the baby. She stifled a sob. I know. Dad, what should I do? Should I leave him? Alexander was silent for a moment. I can't decide that for you. But listen, Catherine Derrick has always been a risk-taker. That's what made him successful. But it can also lead to ruin if he isn't careful. You have to consider if you can trust him to change. And if not, she closed her eyes. I understand. He cleared his throat. If you need a place to stay, come home. Your old room is waiting, or I can set you up in a nearby property. No pressure. But I won't let you face this alone. Tears welled in her eyes, but she felt a measure of warmth. Thank you, Dad. I'll let you know. After the call ended, Catherine sat by the window, watching the Manhattan skyline shimmer under the morning sun. Memories danced in her mind. Meeting Derek at a charity gala, her father hosted the spark in his eyes as he talked about turning dreams into reality, the sweet way he'd slipped a note into her coat pocket with an invitation for a first date. Where had that man gone? Meanwhile, Derek's day took a dramatic turn. He was set to appear for a voluntary discussion at the SEC offices downtown. His lawyers insisted that showing openness would help. But an hour before he was supposed to leave, a text from an unknown number arrived. Meet me at the Park Regency Hotel room, T02. Urgent. Sabrina. His heart pounded. Why would Sabrina risk contacting him now, especially if she was supposedly leaving the country? He showed the text to his head lawyer, Edward Langley, who frowned. That's ill-advised. She's already under suspicion. Derek frowned. But if she has evidence to exonerate me or some angle we can use, it could save the company. Langley shook his head. We can't stop you from going, but this is dangerous. If the SEC finds out, they might interpret it as conspiracy. You should consider letting me or one of the associates go with you. But Derek shook his head. She might not talk if there's a lawyer present. I'll go alone, but I'll record everything. Langley frowned more deeply. Just be careful, and whatever you do, don't offer her money or anything that can be interpreted as bribery. Derek nodded grimly. He texted Sabrina back. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Then he instructed his driver to head to the Park Regency. Anxiety prickled his skin as he imagined the worst. A sting operation, a setup by the SEC, or even blackmail from Sabrina herself. When he arrived at room 1902, he found the door slightly ajar. He knocked softly, hearing the faint sound of classical music from inside. Sabrina's voice called out, "Come in." He stepped into the suite, scanning the opulent living area. Marble floors, plush sofas, fresh roses on the coffee table. Sabrina stood by a window wearing a sleek black dress. She looked impeccable every inch, the mysterious femme fatale. Her gaze locked on Derek. "Don't be shy," she said with a purr. "We don't have much time." Derek hesitated by the door. "Why did you call me here?" She beckoned him over. As he stepped forward, she gestured for him to sit on the sofa. He remained standing. "I'm not staying long. Talk." Sabrina smiled, though tension radiated off her. "I'm leaving for Hong Kong in a few hours. I just wanted to mend things between us." "I never meant for you to get in trouble." He shook his head, anger flaring. "You handed me illegal tips. That's exactly how I got in trouble." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't pretend you didn't know the risks, Derek. You're a smart man. No one invests millions blindly. You could have done your own diligence, but you were too eager." He opened his mouth to retort, but she continued. "Anyway, let's not argue about the past. I have a proposition. I can provide documentation that proves I misled you, that I told you it was my own research, and you relied on it in good faith. If the SEC sees that you could walk away with little more than a slap on the wrist." Derek's heart skipped. "So you'll confess to lying?" She shrugged, a coy smile on her lips. "I'll say whatever you need me to say, for the right price." He clenched his jaw. "What price?" She sauntered to a small table and picked up a folder. "I have it all here, emails, transcripts. It's quite convincing. I want $5 million. Derek nearly choked. $5 million? Sabrina. That's blackmail. Her lips curled. Call it compensation. I'll be ostracized from my circles. I can't do business with you or your connections again. I'll have to rebuild from scratch. Derek's mind spun. $5 million was no small amount, but his company was worth hundreds of millions. If the investigation destroyed it, he could lose everything. Still, even if paying Sabrina might clear him, it was absolutely illegal to bribe a witness. This could bury him deeper in legal trouble. He took a step back, shaking his head. I can't do that. My lawyers would kill me. She rolled her eyes. Your lawyers, Derek. You won't need them if you're indicted. You'll be lucky to avoid jail. He stared at her, fury boiling. So this was your plan all along? To reel me in, feed me these tips and then blackmail me? Sabrina's eyes flashed. Don't be naive. You pursued me for my connections. We used each other. Now let's finish the transaction. He exhaled, attempting to steady himself. I won't pay you a cent. If you have evidence that can help me, provide it. If not, get out of my way. Her expression hardened. Think carefully, Derek. You have a lot to lose. He turned to the door. I'm done with you. As he left, his heart pounded not just with anger, but with fear. Fear that Sabrina might release evidence that would incriminate him further, or worse, twist the facts to frame him entirely. The upcoming meeting at the SEC loomed large in his mind. Back at the Harrington Ventures office, Derek quickly informed Langley of what had transpired. The lawyer's face turned pale. She asked for money. Derek, if we even hint at paying her, it could be seen as witness tampering. We have to disclose this to the SEC, or they might discover it later and accuse us of hiding it. Derek groaned. You're right. Let's get it over with. The two hurried to the SEC building where they were ushered into a conference room. Catherine, who'd insisted on coming along for moral support, sat quietly in the corner. She offered Derek a small nod of encouragement. Despite everything, she was there for him. The lead investigator, a meticulous woman named Francesca Morales, greeted them with cool politeness. Mr. Harrington, we appreciate your cooperation. We have a few questions. Langley gave a tight smile. We want to go on record that Ms. Sabrina Chen attempted to solicit money in exchange for certain statements. We did not comply. Morales leaned forward, interest piqued. That's quite an allegation. Do you have proof? Derek remembered that he had switched on his phone's recording as soon as Sabrina started talking. He glanced at Langley, who nodded. They handed over the audio file. It was risky, but they had no choice. If Sabrina tried to sell a false narrative, at least they had evidence she'd demanded money. Morales listened with headphones, her stern face revealing little reaction. Finally, she removed the headphones. "We'll need to verify the authenticity of this recording. For now, it appears Ms. Chen may have engaged in blackmail." She then fixed Derek with a penetrating gaze. "But that doesn't absolve you, Mr. Harrington. Regardless of Ms. Chen's motives, if you used insider information knowingly or not, you remain accountable." Derek swallowed. "I understand." The interrogation began, and it felt like a slow, agonizing dance. Morales asked about each investment, each conversation with Sabrina, each trade made in the weeks prior. Derek tried to remain calm, giving honest answers, but stopping whenever Langley advised him to. At times, Catherine interjected small clarifications, like how Derek spent nights working on legitimate research, how he had never shown awareness of wrongdoing. Morales took notes meticulously. Finally, after hours, they were dismissed. Langley told them it might take weeks for the SEC to decide whether to press charges, but at least they hadn't been arrested. Catherine managed a small sigh of relief, but Derek's expression was still grim. "This is far from over," he muttered. News of the SEC meeting spread quickly through financial circles. Rumors persisted that Sabrina Chen had fled the country. The press speculated wildly. Did the pregnant wife know secret mistress at center of scandal billionaire playboy or savvy businessman? Each headline more lurid than the last. Investors began pulling out. Harrington Ventures' stock, though private, was partially linked to a public affiliate, and its share price dropped precipitously in after-hours trading. Derek scrambled to reassure stakeholders. He wrote emails, made phone calls, pleaded for patience. Some listened, others distanced themselves. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss damage control. Catherine watched the meltdown with growing horror. She wanted to stand by Derek, but each day more revelations emerged about how close he and Sabrina had been. Photos surfaced of them at charity galas, at private dinners, looking more intimate than Derek had admitted. The press ran with the story, painting a picture of a torrid affair. Catherine felt herself roiling with a mix of jealousy, betrayal, and lingering love. One night, Derek returned home, late, throwing his keys on the kitchen counter in frustration. "We lost another investor. The board is furious." Catherine, who had been restless all evening, approached him tentatively. "You need a strong public statement," she suggested. "Something that clarifies everything from the insider trading allegations to your relationship with Sabrina." He slammed his fist on the counter. "I can't talk about the investigation publicly, Catherine. The lawyers forbid it. And as for Sabrina, I'd just be fueling the tabloid fire." She tried to maintain composure. "So you do nothing?" His face twisted with exhaustion. "Yes, for now. We do nothing. The lawyers say we need to wait until the SEC finishes their inquiry. Then we can mount a defense." Catherine nodded numbly. She felt shut out. Every day, the tension in the penthouse grew heavier, as if invisible walls were closing in. And Derek seemed to alternate between frantic action and stony silence, leaving Catherine alone in her swirling thoughts. A few days later, Catherine's father showed up unannounced at the penthouse. Derek had gone to the office. She welcomed Alexander in, offering him tea. He studied her face, concern etched in his expression. "You look exhausted," he said. "I can't sleep," Catherine admitted. "I keep replaying everything in my head." Alexander placed a comforting hand on hers. "Come home with me, at least for a while, to clear your head. Give Derek space to sort this out. She hesitated, torn. I don't want to abandon him. Alexander sighed. You wouldn't be abandoning him, dear. But you're pregnant, stressed, and it's not healthy. You need calm surroundings, not SEC investigators and salacious tabloids. Catherine thought of the baby, the life growing inside her. She felt a pang of guilt. She was so consumed by Derek's crisis, she barely paused to consider her own well-being. After a long moment, she nodded. You're right. Let me pack a bag. If Derek wants to talk, he knows how to reach me. Within an hour, she was in her father's car, heading toward the tranquility of Connecticut. She left a short note for Derek. I'm going to Dad's for a few days to rest. I hope you understand. She didn't expect an immediate response, and she got none. Days turned into a week. Catherine settled into a guest suite at her father's estate, where the staff fussed over her, ensuring she had healthy meals and plenty of rest. She felt her body relax bit by bit, though her heart still weighed heavy. She kept an eye on the news. Harrington Ventures seemed to be on the brink. More rumors of a mass investor exodus, talk of a possible resignation by Derek if indicted. Then one afternoon, Catherine received a call from an unexpected source, Amanda Wu, Derek's assistant. Amanda's voice trembled with urgency. Mrs. Harrington, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you should know. Catherine gripped the phone. What is it? A man came by the office, Kyle Peterson, one of Derek's old associates. He claimed to have documents that could prove Derek's innocence. But Derek is so busy fighting fires, he barely gave Kyle the time of day. Kyle said he discovered that Sabrina Chen had conspired with another firm to sabotage Harrington Ventures. He said it was personal for her. She wanted to ruin Derek. Something about an old family feud. Catherine's pulse raced. Wait, an old family feud? Sabrina never mentioned anything like that. I don't have details, Amanda said, but Kyle swore he has proof. Sabrina manipulated data to make it look like Derek was trading on insider info, when in fact it was all her doing. He tried emailing Derek, but with the SEC monitor it might get lost. I think Derek's ignoring him because it sounds too far-fetched, but Kyle seems genuine. Catherine thought back to Sabrina's chilling composure, her blackmail attempt. Maybe Sabrina had orchestrated the entire fiasco, setting Derek up for a fall, while reaping her own profit. It was a terrifying thought, but it made sense given her abrupt disappearance and hush-money demands. Amanda, can you put me in touch with Kyle directly? Catherine asked. Of course. I'll text you his number. Minutes later, Catherine spoke to Kyle. He explained that Sabrina's father, Wei Chen, once competed with Derek for a major Chinese tech merger. Derek's success had apparently cost Wei Chen a fortune and tarnished his reputation back home. Kyle believed Sabrina sought revenge under the guise of forging a business relationship, planning to entangle Derek in legal trouble. She fed him tips that appeared legitimate, but in reality they were gleaned from corporate espionage or manipulated data. Then she let the SEC discover them. I have documents showing Sabrina's father orchestrated the entire infiltration, Kyle said, and also a recorded phone call where Sabrina brags about how easy it was to seduce Derek into compliance. Catherine felt anger and relief swirl together. If Kyle's evidence was real, it could vindicate Derek. Why didn't you come forward sooner? He hesitated. I only discovered it a few days ago, rummaging through old servers and unsubscribed email accounts. I used to manage some side projects with Derek, but we parted ways after a disagreement. I had no idea Sabrina's infiltration ran this deep. I thought I owed it to Derek to come clean now. Thank you, Catherine said earnestly. Please get those documents to Derek's lawyers, and also send a copy to me. Catherine returned to the city the very next day. Her father tried to persuade her otherwise, but she insisted. If these documents can save Derek, I need to be there, she said. At Harrington Ventures, she found Derek hunched over a conference table, scattered with papers, eyes bloodshot. The board was in an uproar. The SEC investigation was intensifying. Media outlets were calling him the next Bernie Madoff. It was chaos. Catherine entered the room and placed her hand on Derek's shoulder. He flinched at first, then turned to see her. A mixture of surprise and relief flashed across his face. Catherine, you're back. She nodded. I have news. I spoke to Kyle Peterson. Derek frowned. Kyle, I haven't seen him in ages. Quickly, Catherine explained what Kyle had told her. She saw Derek's eyes widen, a spark of hope igniting. If he really has that evidence, we can prove Sabrina was the mastermind. This changes everything. It does. Catherine agreed. We need to move fast, though, before Sabrina disappears for good. Derek called an emergency meeting with Langley and the legal team. Kyle arrived with a briefcase full of documents and digital files. He walked them through each piece of evidence, showing how Sabrina had infiltrated Harrington Ventures, forged research reports, and leaked them to Derek under false pretenses. The final damning piece, a recorded phone call, where Sabrina gleefully admitted Derek is so hungry for power, he won't even question where the data comes from. By the time the SEC is done with him, he'll be ruined. Langley's eyes shone with triumph. This is exactly what we need. With this, we can build a defense that Derek was the victim of fraud. He'll still face questions about his due diligence, but it's a significant shift in liability. Derek looked stunned, as if someone had handed him a life preserver, just as he was drowning. He turned to Catherine, voice thick. I don't deserve you. I was so reckless. I should have known better. She placed a hand over his. Let's just get through this. Armed with the new evidence, Derek's lawyers presented everything to the SEC. The response was immediate and dramatic. Francesca Morales grilled them for hours, verifying the documents, analyzing the authenticity of the recordings, and cross-checking them against Sabrina's earlier claims. 2 days later, the SEC issued a statement. They were redirecting the focus of the investigation toward Sabrina Chen and her associates. Derek remained under scrutiny for negligence, but the criminal angle for insider trading was all but dropped. The media pounced on the story of the scheming mistress, fueling a new wave of scandalous headlines. But for Derek, the worst legal nightmares seemed to recede. He wasn't out of the woods. Entirely civil penalties for failing to perform proper diligence could still be on the table, and Harrington Ventures' reputation was badly tarnished. Investors remained wary, but at least the threat of prison no longer loomed. Throughout the madness, Catherine stayed by Derek's side, though their personal relationship remained strained. She had forgiven him enough to fight for his exoneration, but the wound of his betrayal festered. One evening, after a grueling day of damage control, they sat in the living room. Derek poured himself a stiff drink, offered Catherine sparkling water instead. They sipped in silence. Thank you, he finally said, for not walking away, for finding Kyle, for everything. She nodded. I did it for our child, and maybe for the Derek I thought I knew. He winced at that. She continued, Where do we go from here? He drained his glass. I can't pretend this didn't happen. I I failed you. I was so blinded by ambition, I forgot the vows we made. And Sabrina. Catherine cut in gently. Let's not talk about her anymore. She sighed. I'm not sure what's next for us, but I do know that if we're going to move forward, we need honesty therapy and time. He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping. I'll do whatever it takes. In the weeks that followed, Derek officially stepped back from the CEO role of Harrington Ventures, appointing a trusted associate to steady the ship while he sorted out the final legal tangles. The board reluctantly agreed, seeing that Derek had become a lightning rod for controversy. Meanwhile, Catherine focused on her impending motherhood. She invited Derek to prenatal appointments, and he came. Their interactions remained cautious, but as they witnessed the ultrasound images and heard the baby's heartbeat, a profound sense of shared responsibility bound them. Then one crisp autumn morning, Catherine went into labor. Derek rushed her to the hospital, eyes wild with worry. Hours later, they welcomed a baby boy, whom they named Andrew Alexander Harrington. Andrew for Derek's late grandfather and Alexander for Catherine's father. Holding their newborn son, Catherine and Derek felt something shift. The swirling chaos of the past months faded, replaced by a fragile hope. They had survived betrayal scandal and near financial ruin, but life had given them this new beginning, a chance to change. Epilogue. Short conclusion. Within the novel. Over the next year, the SEC investigation wrapped up. Derek settled the negligence charge with a hefty fine and strict compliance measures. Harrington Ventures, though, rebounded under new leadership, and Derek devoted himself to philanthropic initiatives while quietly rebuilding trust among colleagues and loved ones. Sabrina Chen never resurfaced in the US, rumored to be hiding out in Hong Kong under her father's protection, though whispers of further legal action haunted her. For Catherine and Derek, the road to healing was long and winding. They attended counseling, learned to communicate more honestly, and above all focused on raising little Andrew in an environment of love and stability. Through tearful confessions and late-night heart-to-hearts, Catherine began to forgive, and Derek sought to become the man she deserved. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, life rarely is. But in the hush of their child's laughter and the quiet strength of renewed commitment, they found the seeds of something real, something worth preserving. And though the headlines had screamed betrayal and scandal, the final pages of their story were yet unwritten, carrying the possibility of redemption and a new kind of happiness. Life can twist and turn in the most unexpected ways. For Derek and Catherine Harrington, what began as a shocking betrayal escalated into a high-stakes legal drama threatening to tear their lives apart. Yet amidst scandal and heartbreak, they discovered a glimmer of resilience and a reminder that even when everything seems lost, hope can emerge from the shadows. In this story, we've witnessed secrets laid bare, ambitions tested, and a love that struggled to survive the storm. Ultimately, it is a testament to the power of truth and the choices we make in the wake of our deepest regrets. If you found yourself enthralled by the twists and turns of Derek and Catherine's journey, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more captivating tales of ambition, betrayal, and redemption. Your support allows us to continue bringing such stories to life, and we can't wait to share the next chapter with you.